Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Heat versus Height webinar presented to you by IPAF Middle East and South Asia in association partner with Ayush, Qatar, and our media partner, WSH Global. So before we start, I would like to read all your comments from where you are watching from. So I have here from, let's see, we have someone from KSA, from Bong Briones, watching live from LinkedIn. Hi, all joining from KSA. And also, let's um let's read from, okay, non already message from where they're coming from. So everyone who is joining us and watching us live from LinkedIn and YouTube, welcome everyone. So before I start this webinar, I would like to introduce, or let's just say give an information or a background about this webinar. So this heat versus height webinar, working under the sun and fighting the heat, has always been a struggle to our safety practitioners and operators. This webinar will teach us about the difficult and how to overcome them. So before we start this webinar and before I introduce our one of our speakers and also someone from Ayush Qatar. So I would like to inform everyone that we will give certificates to everyone who registered for the webinar. So, if you're watching right now but haven't signed up, please do so. The registration link can be found in the comments section. You can find it there. I pinned the registration for LinkedIn and YouTube. You can find it on the comment section. And also, there will be a question and answer session at the end of this webinar. So be sure to leave your question in the comment box below. So with all not, so I won't what do you call this? I won't pause anymore and I will continue and introduce you, everyone, to Venkat from Ayash Qatar branch chair to give us a word and to introduce our speaker. So, good evening, sir. Welcome to
Well,
Heat versus Height webinar.
thank you, Aliza. Thank you, Aliza, for that introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, those who are joining from different parts of the world. Glad to see that we are having more than 80 people are attending this webinar. Thank you very much for everyone. My name is Venkat. I'm the Ayush Qatar branch chair. Glad to host this particular webinar in collaboration with IPAF and WSH. If you see, one of the objectives of Ayush Qatar branch is collaborating with the organizations and deliver values to the members. In turns, the health and safety professionals gets benefits. This particular webinar is also one of meeting that objective in collaboration with WSH and IPAF with an interesting topic: heat versus height. Being a health and safety professionals, we all have one common challenge, especially those who are working in this part of the region, that is a Gulf region, is working in the summer, that is heat. Yeah, I'm sure all of you will agree with me, and we have a challenge to ensure that people who are working in the open sunlight are safe, safely going back home. And not only the risk associated with the heat, when we work in the heat, we also do other activities also, which is also high risk activities like working in height, confined space, hard works. Everything happens in the heat. So when we do these kind of multiple high risk activities, the risk level manifolds. So we all, as a HSC professionals, should look into that, how best we are managing those risks effectively. How best we all practicing that hierarchy of controls, and how best we are managing those hierarchy of controls effectively, how best we are using the technologies effectively, how best we are using the engineering controls effectively, so that holistically we are managing those risks, so that our people working at the site are safely going back and safely working. And today, this particular webinar is collaborated with the International Powered Access Federation of, that is IPAF, Middle East region. And to take this, as Aliza said, if you have any questions, please do interact, and all the questions will be answered. And this is the first time Ayush Qatar branch is collaborating with IPAF, and we have a long-term collaboration plan. And based on your feedback, we'll be coming out with a lot of other events in the coming months, and give your feedback, and also ask you questions, and that questions will be answered at the end of the presentations. Now, let me invite the speaker today. Speaker today is Mr. Jason Woods. He came to Middle East a few years ago with a drive of promoting safety for workers who works at height, with a key focus on reducing the risk of accidents and increasing awareness of the workforce among management tradesmen and training providers. His connection with many safety associations from local to international in supporting the HSE professionals. His aim is to boost safety practices while working at height. He collaborates with safety groups and governing bodies throughout the Middle East and South Asia. Actually, Jason now currently working with the IPAFs, managing the IPAFs, the Middle East and South Asia region as regional manager since 2013, based in Dubai. He has more than 30 years of industrial experience with the access industry, gained with the equipment manufacturers, rental companies, and the training bodies. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together to welcome Jason Woods to take over. Jason, screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Benedict, and thank you, Ali, also. Before we start, certainly a big thank you goes out to the audience who's attending, as we all run very busy lifestyles, meaning throughout our working week, and time zones. Just looking at the audience who's in, there's a lot of Middle East, but we've got India, and we've got the Philippines as well, which, looking at my clock, it's 20 to 12 p.m. in the Philippines. So, it's nice to see some real good commitment to safety. And, we're not born safety practitioners, or, it's a passion, I think, that we all like. And once you're in the safety field, it's very difficult to get out of it. I arrived in this industry back in 1996, I think then. And again, this type of industry is a magnet, and it certainly, it just keeps us excited, and keeps us wanting to look for more and help each other. As Venkat has explained, I do get involved with many safety groups. I run many work groups, such as manufacturing work groups or powered access machines in the region, where we have discussion points of what type of machines are likely to come into the region over the next 12 months. So we can certainly factor our webinars then to these kind of areas when you have new equipment arriving. Lithium batteries is a big hot potato at the moment, where the way of charging machines, electric machines, has changed. But anyway, that's by the by. But yeah, no, really pleased to be here. I've done a lot of work with IOSH in other countries, UAE for one, and I'm hoping that we can pick the ball up with Qatar branch, and certainly help you guys as members. Certainly focusing on, what would you like to hear? Today's topic is heat versus height, simply because we're in the summer months, and it's very hot out there, as we know, and it's very challenging. So I thought that this, would be a perfect start of our campaign, and try to share some good knowledge for Qatar region, and moving forward. So yeah, certainly enough about myself. So Ali, if you can start the presentation. So yeah, if you can, that's it. Yeah. So no, just go back one slide, Ali, if you can. So heat versus height. As we all know, the challenges are there in the summer months. I'm going to call it summer months, but as we all are aware, that anything from kind of May to September, October is what I would call summer months, which is 5 to 6 months of a run. The challenges are still there in a sense that the heights which we have to reach in these platforms can be tremendous at times, and simply that, you know, the focus does go on the individual. But also, I think that what we should open up is another page for the equipment and how the equipment is performing through these summer months as well. So there's a balance there, and certainly when we look at heat versus height, you know, like I say, in the Gulf region alone, we do see um, we see some tremendous reaches where we need to send the platform to. So Ali, if you can take it to the next level, next slide, sorry. So when we think of, if we start off with heat, first of all, when we think of heat, we focus on certainly the workplace, and most um, areas when we're working at height with heat, it can be some extreme temperatures. We all know that the heat can take us up to late 40s, 48, 49, even touching on 50 degrees at some points, some areas. Humidity can play a challenge with this. As we know, you know, we do have summer working hours, but still, you know, 10 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon can still be a challenge for the worker in these conditions. So, Ali, if you can take us to the next slide, simply because when we think about the heat or summer months, I think that our focus is more on heat than height. And I think that what we should do is try and balance them both, because naturally the machines need to be fit for purpose, for sure. When we talk to rental providers in all regions, we find that there are an amount of breakdowns in the summer months in comparison to slightly colder weather. I'm saying slightly because we don't have much colder weather as a Gulf region. But in reality, we generally think of the heat, as I say, more than the height, simply because we don't take into considerations of the lift and platform position. So it's easy to get that balance wrong, I think. Um, when we talk about working in heat, most of our areas are outside and they're not in shaded areas, which can be a challenge. You know, we could be 48 degrees out lifting a platform at 150 feet. So with that to consider, surely that at some point that the operator is going to feel the heat whilst he's elevated. So it's important that we try and look at these factors and put some sort of framework in place where we can have a fairly usable structure then of, you know, work performance from heat and height together. If we can go to the next slide, Ali. When we start looking at how we measure the heat, when you do research on this, you'll find that a lot of the heat index is measured from in shaded areas. So even though we have a kind of guideline, but naturally if you work in direct sunlight, certainly that is going to give you a different reading, for sure, maybe 10 to 15% increase of heat and the humidity. But also it's the activity of the operator is more, which I would like to lean to. As you can see, we're going from a yellow kind of amber to red. Naturally, red is where the high risks are certainly with us, and that's where we should really focus on precaution. And when I move into the red zone, certainly that what I should be looking at is, you know, how can I minimize these risks? But like I say, that most of our activity when we're working at height in the summer months are certainly in direct sunlight, which can certainly cause an issue for the operator. Ali, if you can go to the next slide. So when we put all the factors together, things happen. If we talk about an accident or a near miss, we generally get accidents happening fairly quickly, and the response can be confusing at times. Um, when we talk about emergency rescue, um, emergency rescue is such a unique area of elevator work platforms, and it's quite easy to get wrong if we're not trained correctly. As you can see on the video there, naturally that they've been doing some hot works at height, and the two operators or two people in the platform have got themselves caught. The platforms become on fire, and there's a very quick emergency rescue plan to be put in place. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute that all rescue plans should be platform to platform. There are times when we've got to put other considerations before that we get to this point. They do increase some other risks when we're working at height, when we're bringing platform to platform. And these kind of risks can be, even on the video there, obviously falling out of the platform is high. The contact with other machines. We have 3 boom lifts together there. The rescue plan needs to be really thought out for the activity. In terms of a international decal, as you can see, the white decal you will see around the emergency controls. And generally, when we see this decal, what it will do, it will help us then identify where the controls are. Now, the emergency controls are not all the same, so certainly it's very important for us to understand what type of controls we have when we're going to work at height, so that we can start our planning for the workforce and the management team. I would say try it and test it also, because naturally in an emergency we don't have a lot of time. I would say that the 2 people in the platform from the video which you've just seen, they did survive. They had some burns for sure, but there was no fatalities. Um, so yeah, there is a good side to an accident. Of course, it doesn't have to be always bad, but certainly, the takeaway from this slide is to certainly have a plan in place and make sure it works. Make sure that everybody's familiar with, if there's an accident and we got somebody at height, then we know on how to bring them back down to the safe zone. There is a sequence, a general sequence is that we will try to use the upper controls first. If we can't do that, then we will turn the key to from the platform controls being live to the ground controls. That should allow the operator at the ground then to move the platform into the safe zone. If that's not working, then we start going through the emergency sequence then of emergency controls. Like I say, platform to platform doesn't always work, and we shouldn't think of platform to platform as the first step. There are other procedures which we should take in, or other factors that we should take into consideration first. Ali, if you can go to the next slide. So what I would like us to do is to have an eye-opener in terms of machine breakdowns and operator error. Obviously, when we call it an operator error, it could be as simple as the key not in the right position, or we could say that the emergency stop button is pushed in when it should be pulled out. So, like I say, it's not always a big operator error. It could be something very simple, and maybe some of it we can do over the telephone, because some projects are, a few kilometers away. But after doing some research in the regions, the Gulf regions of operator error, they generally fluctuate from 30% to 60%. Now, when we talk about machine operator error and 30% to 60%, speaking to some Qatar rental companies, the figure which Qatar has come back with, that they feel that their machine callouts for operator error is around 60%, which is very high, by the way. What we should be looking at is certainly focusing on the training which is provided, and making sure that the operator is fully understanding of the full controls, whether it's pre-use inspection, post-use inspection, and then focusing on the emergency descent system. So, like I say, we could probably reduce this number quite easily by focusing on the content of training that's delivered. Then we look at the summer months increase, and we're quoting 1 to 2% more in the summer months of operator error. Now, I know that doesn't sound too much actually, and it isn't too much, but we should take a step back and ask ourselves, is that 1 or 2%? Does that become a serious incident as an operator error? And if so, are we then moving into that kind of emergency zone then? So, like I say, 1 to 2% in the summer months additional is not kind of that much, but it could be 1 or 2% of a serious incident, which could result in a serious injury then, or even a fatality even. So, like I say, in terms of operator error, there is ways we can get this down. More education, certainly at training level, toolbox talks, also understanding where we are in the position of the project. If we're building or erecting steel, then naturally we've got a lot of boom lifts there. Certainly we could do a toolbox talk on boom lifts, pre-use inspection. The guys are going to be wearing harnesses, so we can implement some harness. On the IPAF website, we do have areas where we support projects, and there is an area where you can quite easily download toolbox talks and use it on your project. You can always reach out to me in Dubai as well, where I can help on projects and come and help you with your toolbox talk. But certainly this figure of operator error, I'm pretty sure that we can make this reduce this by a lot in terms of reducing the percentage for sure. Ali, can you take us to the next slide? So moving on from operator error, I would like us to focus on decals, and decals do take a battering throughout the summer months, naturally in direct sunlight. The idea of a decal is that the decal will give you information, and it will give you a warning through hazards. So it's very important that you can read the decals clearly. And certainly, if we're looking at safe working load decals, then it would give us indicators of how much weight we can put in the platform. If we're going to talk about pressure low decals, meaning that the wheels are in contact with the ground, so that when we raise the platform, there'll be a specific dimension of pressure going into the ground. So, these kind of decals are very important for us as we start raising and lowering the platform. So I would ask you to focus on decals, which on your equipment are being used on site, and make sure that the operator can use it, because naturally a forward position in a lever is different to one brand to another, and forward might mean reverse with one machine. So certainly, look at the decals, what you've got, speak to the rental companies if you need them to be replaced, or if you own your own machines, then speak to the local dealer and again ask them to replace some decals for you. Because again, you've got to look at this balance of operator error. Surely if the operator can't read the decals, then we can't really blame the operator for operating the machine incorrectly, because perhaps he didn't know the right control at that particular time. So Ali, if you can take us to the next slide. So something that we do see still quite a lot, we see netting alongside the platform, the cage as we know it. In terms of what you see on the screen now, this is a big no-no. The mesh should be approved by manufacturers, and the mesh can come in two fashions. So it can be a half mesh or it can be a full mesh, meaning at knee height or full height. Why do we emphasize that this is a big no-no? You must understand that the moment we start adding things to platforms, then we're actually we are kind of affecting the calculation of the lift, meaning the height. So it might not seem much by just putting a mesh around a platform, but really, in reality, we could be decreasing the wind speed, for an example. It could create some sort of a sail. So I would always seek advice from the local rental companies and ask them if you need to minimize dropped items, what can they provide? Certainly what you see at the moment is a big no-no for sure. And naturally, we got to be careful that it doesn't hide decals, which are very important for us. If we can go to the next slide, Ali. So this now takes me into, if we talk about the dynamics of lifting elements. Now, we do focus on platforms, and naturally platforms will take us into unique positions where we can reach some great heights. Naturally, an elevating work platform is one of the safest means of access at height in the world, simply because we do have good access to height, we have good lifting elements, and we have an emergency controls if the platform needs to be saved and rescued. Um, the challenge always comes when we look at the operator and positioning the chassis to start off with, because when we look at articulated booms, we don't just have one lifting element. The articulated boom will give us unique features, and the unique features can be up and over an obstruction, for an example. But what we're relying on, we're now relying on the skill of the operator, and the operator has to decide which lifting element he needs to lift at a certain position and a certain time. So if you think of the articulated boom, which we have on the screen now, so you can see a setting position. He's raised the lower lifting element up first. We call it the lower boom, and then he's moved then to his upper boom. Now the sequence of lift should really be the lower boom will give us a little bit of height, and then our upper boom should always work then in sequence with upper boom, telescopic, jib, platform movement. All these items here are platform positioning, but that sequence of lift goes back then to a skilled operator. And as again, when I mentioned earlier on, we focus on some good training will obviously give us this then, because we need to assess the operator. We need to make sure that he's capable then of sending the platform to unique areas. And why I'm focusing on this, because sometimes in summer months we don't have very long before the temperature starts really picking up. So it's important that we get the operator up to the work zone quite easily, quite quickly, and naturally safely. Ali, if you can go on to the next slide. So the next slide will give us indicators of um, what we rely on. So naturally, we have pieces of steel which is driven by or directed and controlled by hydraulic features. So we start off with a tank which is in the chassis and the canopy, and we have hydraulic block. Then we'll have some valves which will direct the hydraulic fluid into different directions, simply depending on which lifting element we would like to choose. Now, what I don't want us to just rely on, though, is the upper part of an elevating work platform. Don't forget, some of these platforms, we rely on stabilizers and outriggers. And these two stability systems are kind of, they do two jobs. They are also designed to level. So meaning that if we're on uneven ground, then we need to level the chassis before we're able to lift up to a certain position. Naturally, again, we're relying on safety devices, that if the chassis was not in the level position, hopefully the platform wouldn't lift. But again, we've got to go back to then the summer months. How is it affecting the machines? We only got to look at our bodies to start off with. We know that we feel the heat some days, and then you switch it to machines, and naturally components, decals, safety devices, naturally these items are also going to start feeling the heat. And when we start moving into summer months, we do occasionally get into stress and strains. Ali, if you can go to the next slide for me. So just breaking down where is our common faults. In terms of hydraulic system, certainly can be one of our common faults. Certainly fluid, the hydraulic fluid could potentially overheat if we have an insufficient cooling system. This can cause certainly some issues for us, and cause the machine to have a breakdown. We look at the engine again. Engines can overheat. We see buses driving around with the kind of the engine parts and canopy open just to try and cool it down, and it's a similar fashion when we're using the machines a lot in the summer, and for a longer period of time on occasions, that we need to take some factors and considerations into thought here. Then we move into hydraulic leaks. Hydraulic leaks are very common. Why are they very common? Because we live in the desert in the Gulf regions, and we have obviously our sandstorms, the direct sunlight, and that they can cause a tremendous amount of issues inside the connection parts of a male and female connection of a hydraulic hose, and certainly come into effect with the O-rings, and they'll do a number of things. They either expand, they harden, or they become brittle. And again, if you're talking about an operator who certainly is heavy-handed on the platform controls, so he's kind of shooting the hydraulic fluid from one area to another, again, it could cause a platform to burst. When we look at platforms or hydraulics bursting, then our pressure from the cylinder then is being reduced. So naturally, what we don't want to do is put ourselves in a position where the platform is stuck elevated. So certainly regular inspections in these areas, if the platforms are on site over a period of time, it would certainly pay you to take note of inspections on the machines. Like I say, that it's not all bad, but certainly we should consider these factors if we're using elevated work platforms at height and sending people in the summer months to work in the heat. Ali, if you can go to the next slide. Yeah. Okay. So some other areas I'd like us to look at. I've mentioned some already. Operator error for sure. Obviously battery failures. So batteries can really take a hammering in the summer months. Naturally, the heat. You only got to hold your mobile phone some days, and you feel it overheating, and it's the same kind of effect with batteries. So a lot of care and maintenance on batteries, and certainly keep an eye on these things. Naturally, that we do like to have power source, and sometimes we do rely on the battery to give us some good power. And bearing in mind that sometimes we need to have the battery as a backup, especially on auxiliary system, if we need to draw the platform down from height rather than the hydraulics. We do have also communication failures in certain MEEPs after 2012. MEEPs are using CAN cables, which are sending messages for fault finding and so on. And certainly that it's possible that the communication from one area to another could fail. And that could, if that happens, it could even possibly leave your platform elevated at height at times, and the platform controls then become redundant. So again, back to good pre-use and post-use inspections will hopefully remove these kind of risks, where potentially it might cause a total failure then. Ali, if you can go to the next slide. And some of these, again, I've already mentioned, so I won't sit too deep. Hydraulic systems failing, and naturally rescue plan. We should have a rescue plan part of your risk assessment if persons are elevated at height. And naturally, if we're working in direct sunlight, this can really affect the pace then of the rescue being successful. Well, I think the takeaway here is: can you imagine if we had a failure, a mechanical failure, when we really needed that component to help us rescue the person at height? So, important, and I can't emphasize this enough. The inspections are very important. That we implement these into our projects and make sure that these post-use or pre-use inspections are being carried out correctly. Ali, if you can go to the next slide. So a couple of recommendations. As I mentioned, regular maintenance checks. Have a guide, follow the manufacturer's guidance from the manual. You can also follow guidance from IPAF website. We have a lot of guidance there. Again, can be downloaded. Certainly make sure that the operators and, well, first of all, the operators are trained correctly, and they understand the full mechanics of the machine from A to Z, start to finish, including emergency descent systems. If we're going to carry passengers in a platform, it's always a tough one, this is, because does the passenger need to be trained? Now, depends of your job site whether you feel that the passenger should be trained, simply because perhaps that he doesn't, or if there's an injury and an incident with the operator, who's going to lower the platform at height down to the safe zone. Some sites prefer to have the passenger trained. Some sites will add into the risk assessment that we would expect the passenger to have at least minimum of a harness qualification. And if you're not going to train the passenger, then you should have a rescue plan in place so that somebody can take over. So as I say, it's not just training the operator. We need to step further afield to that and understand who's involved with this activity. In terms of equipment updates, if possible, consider, if we do have older machines can still work quite easily, but perhaps that we can speak to manufacturers and add some newer technologies, maybe more safety devices, which can help us then limit switches and so on, to have or simplify our process then with the equipment. In safety protocols, certainly make sure operators are familiar. We do, as a rule, when a machine is delivered, it should be delivered to a trained operator, and the person delivering the machine should hand the machine over correctly then from the rental aspect to the user, again covering all controls which are relevant then for the safe use of that machine. Ali, if you can go to the next slide. So that takes me then into the emergency kits. Naturally, we do see fire extinguishers in platforms quite a lot. We do look at the risk of fire, and the fire risk is obviously in two areas. So one can be at the chassis area, and one can be in the platform. So I think that we should take into or consideration that, certainly a fire extinguisher may need to be in the platform at height with the operator. The operator obviously must not just have the operator license for the machine, he must also be trained to operate the fire extinguisher. In terms of the ground, we don't see a lot of fire extinguishers attached to the chassis. That this can be possible if you speak to rental companies and manufacturers, that they do have specific accessories for this. But also we can certainly look at, maybe if you've got 3 or 4 fire extinguishers in one area, maybe have one in a stand ready, and if one of the machines caught fire at the ground, then you would still have something there. But again, certainly, factor all these areas into your risk assessment. And then external support. We have rental companies in the region of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE. It's all the same kind of process. when machines go out, they have a mechanic on call. There's always somebody you can reach out to if you have an issue with your machines, machine oil leaks and so on. So use it and make sure that everybody's familiar with these kind of external support from rental providers. Certainly safety is always top priority for sure. Ali, if you can go to the next slide. So this is just a snapshot, a glance of, what an inspection should look like. We should certainly look at all features of the machine, starting from the chassis up to the lifting pack, moving into the platform, and you should regularly inspect your machine. So we would have it as a daily inspection, move into a pre-use inspection, and a lot of these areas of concerns for the machine putting it under extreme temperatures, we can avoid machine breakdowns if we have a good process in place. Again, you can follow the IPAF website, you can connect us directly at the Middle East office, or with the machine you will have an operator's manual. So there's lots of avenues that you can pick up good data which can help you then with pre-use and post-use inspection, and naturally with your daily inspections. Obviously, if you identify anything is incorrect or you're unsure, naturally isolate, tag and report and seek advice. Then going back, as I mentioned on a previous slide, external help with your rental provider then. Okay, Ali, if you can go to the next slide. So again, we look at summer months and operator activity. We drive around cities and we're still seeing this where the operators like to have shading at height. Naturally, it's a big no-no. I'm hoping that you all agree. The issues which we have at height with umbrellas or banners is that, again, we may create a sail and affect the calculation of the lift. And again, like I say, it's a big no-no. What we should do is focus on the operator and the behavior of the operator and put some good steps in progress then to help the operator feel comfortable whilst working at height. I know it's easier said than done, especially when we're out in the field at 48 degrees, elevated over a building at 150 feet. It's easy to say it on the ground in comparison to the actual of being operated in the platform. Ali, if you can go to the next slide for me. So just a recap really of high temperatures. Obviously it does have negative effects on our body when working at heights in the heat for long periods of time. So certainly our real risks is sunstroke, heat stroke, certainly are high risks. And I understand that, we do put a lot of focus here, but I think let's really look at the activity. And it's not easy. It's certainly not easy to work at height in these extreme temperatures and expect the same kind of performance from the operator. We've got to let these guys breathe and bring them down back to safe zone, and make sure they are competent then going back up, because it can affect the way that the operator will perform for sure. Ali, if you can go to the next slide. So a couple of areas just as a takeaway, really, some tips. Certainly watch and check the weather and see what the weather forecast is for the following day when we're going to commence work at height. Certainly cover up as much as we can rather than covering the platform. Stay hydrated. Certainly use the appropriate fall protection to prevent the fall. We will have another session on fall prevention against fall protection at a later date. I will come back to that. Certainly, we'd say be sun smart, take regular breaks, and certainly shade when we need to shade at the ground, not at height. So Ali, if you go to the next slide. So again, we focus on our risks, our typical risks: temperature and heat, humidity. It's all there from, let's say, May to potentially leading into October. When we look at the UV rays, again, what PPE should the workforce have whilst they're working outdoors at height in the summer? Is that something that we should take into consideration? Modifying our work, naturally we work in summer hours where we reduce the time scale for having a midsummer break, meaning that we have a gap, but still remember that before that break and after that break, we still need to take into considerations the users and the operators, and certainly tailor some training for the summer months as well, so that it keeps giving reminders then to the operators, and toolbox talks are very well accepted, I think, in our business. And the more we do, the more we can touch and reach operators to work safely. Ali, if you could take us to the next slide. So, again, thinking ahead, be ready for all areas, and consider all avenues. So always plan your work at height. I think let's focus really on the operator. What do we need to do? How can we make their work run a little bit smoother? And certainly focus on the machine, because naturally the machine will take an area where we should consider, especially with hydraulic leaks. Excuse me. We look at decals being faded, so I can't understand what the directional drive is. Maybe it's an overload device which I need to be aware of, but I can't read it. So again, we need to really focus on these areas. And going back to my first statement of machine breakdowns, perhaps we can reduce these breakdowns just by smartening up our usage on elevating work platforms. But naturally, training is a big umbrella for sure. We do a lot of training with our instructors, our teachers, throughout the Middle East, and the idea is that that message then can be filtered through then to the users and the managers. Ali, if you can go to the next slide. So just a kind of close off now. That this is an example of some of our members in Qatar. We're very pleased to have on board. IPAF are similar to IOSH, where we are a federation of safety, and we do kind of benchmark as not-for-profit. What does that really mean? It means that the revenue that we draw in, that we will spend it back. We have a duty of care to spend that revenue back into industry. So that could be anything from training course development, making sure that we're following the flow of traffic, of accident reporting. If there's a trend in one area, call it entrapment, then the training material then will implement a lot more emphasis on entrapment. We focus on safety campaigns. So this year we're focusing on electricity, working very close to electric pylons and electricity in general. So like I say, we're similar fashion to IOSH. We are a not-for-profit federation, and we're owned by members. So the members' voice is certainly what we follow. And we come up with a 3 to 5 year plan where we kind of emphasize, the growth of safety. If we can go to the next slide, Ali. And we naturally have training providers, and we're on track for teaching around 18,000 students in the Middle East this year. So it's a tremendous amount of students that we're teaching, meaning operators. We do very well on management level, meaning HSE modules. I believe that you've all been sent the link for the MUPS for managers. You're more than welcome to have the e-learning program, and I hope that there'll be some good takeaways from the course which can help you then build on your project and keep maintaining a safe project, and certainly with the operators, they come down the same way that they went up. And certainly, there's a lot of good work in Doha region. You've got local governments, you've got Ashgul, who does a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes to, really benchmark safety. You've got Qatar Foundation, you've got QP, QE. There's many, and obviously groups like yourself as IOSH. You're continuously driving safety through all channels. So, it's a jigsaw. It's a jigsaw of safety for sure, and every piece counts. Um, Ali, if we can go to the next slide. So, as I say, just to um, close everything off now, we will take some questions. Hopefully, that we don't have too many questions, but the next webinar I've been asked to run is in and around the wear and tear of tyres and understanding what tyres types are available in the marketplace, when we can use them, when we can't use them, what is good, what is poor, what is usable. So I will open up a webinar specifically for tyres, and please come and join us, because I hope that, again, it can help you on your job site. So yeah, we'll plan it for the 26th of September. Ali, if we can go to the next slide.
So, yeah. Hi, guys. Now the floor is open for your questions, and I will read few or I find here, and I could see that there are no much question. I think everyone who's watching right now do fully understand what you're saying, Jason. And I think this is not a question really, but let me show it and read it. So Asia itself, I know we are not we are particularly on South Asia and Middle East, but Asia itself is that heat zone impact climate globally. What can you say about this? Is it true or really somewhat related to? But I know
Uh,
Middle East do always have a heat um what do you call this? Heat strike? Heat wave. Heat wave.
yeah, I would agree, to be honest with you, that our countries, whether we talk about South Asia or Middle East, we do work in extreme temperatures. Very very rare in most regions we find that temperatures drop, and we should take precautions into place, because the machines which we're operating now can raise more than 60 meters high, even with a chassis weight of 25 ton in weight. We must always think of the operator and make sure that he's competent enough to use the machine correctly. And naturally, that's just one part of the risk assessment. The onus as a safety practitioner is massive, because your activities are so different to other countries and regions. But yeah, I would agree that we do work a lot in a hot zone for sure.
Okay. So next question is from LinkedIn. So how we describe the age of nuke when we select for a work?
Well, I don't think we should focus too much on the age of machine to start off with, because machines are designed to last for a very, very long time, as long as they've been well maintained by professional mechanics and they've used the correct components when needing replacements. Um, so sometimes it can be falsely led by focusing on the age of machine. Naturally, when you look at newer machines and the change of technology is then you would see that there is a difference. But there's a lot to be said for older machines that can still be used. But it depends on the project, I think, and depends of what the requirements are.
Next question is what are the psychological hazards of continuous work in heat?
Venkat, I think that this one can be for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Eliza, for that question. Yeah, Mr. Osama, if you look at the working in heat, the hazard is the physiological hazard. That is the physical hazards. That's an immediate hazard. And if someone is exposed to the sunlight for a long time, definitely it is going to add the risk of stress, and definitely there will be in psychological hazards. Okay, so first, as a health and safety professional, let's focus on the physical hazards. That if we reduce that, definitely that we can indirectly reduce the psychological hazards also, right?
I think it's a continuation of
Physical
keep
hazards, yeah.
talking, yeah, and
Yeah,
toolbox talks, making sure everybody's comfortable working at height in the heat and so on, um, and certainly confident for sure, because you know yourself that it's quite easy to get dehydrated in the summer months, and we've all done it, I'm sure, where we haven't drunk enough water, and then can you imagine lifting a platform into a unique position at 180 feet high? You know, that's we've got to take these factors into consideration for sure.
yeah,
So, in addition, in this question, I would like to add up that the psychological hazard is always like connected when you take your first aid training or first, like when you have your like training for first aid or emergency risk assessment, you also need this one, I think, if I'm not mistaken, because it will also help the one who's helping or the one who is in heat can also assess if this one is need psychological testing or psychological help, because when people are in heat or like when you hit in heat stroke, people sometimes hallucinate and do have their like traumatized if they're being in such heat, which like when you're from a cold place then going in a hot or a warm place, then it's like a culture shock to everyone.
yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks, Aliza. That
yeah,
you know, like any other activity, even in the walking in heat, there is a psychological risk associated. Okay, so we should people who are walking in the heat should feel safe first of all. Okay, if they feel safe, if if you want someone to feel safe, we need to openly communicate. People walking in the heat should be uh, feel free to speak up if there are any hazards, if they have facing any issues. So such work environment that we need to develop, so that if at all they are having any kind of fear or if any kind of a stress they are developing, they can express that, and the as health and safety professionals or supervisors or engineers, we can help them to reduce the psychological hazards in addition to the physical hazards.
So next question is, how can PPEs be used in continuous extreme temperature? I think
I think
Jason
that
would like to answer this one.
yeah, and we have this a lot with obviously working at height PPE. There's it's like buying a pair of shoes. You know, you can buy PPE and spend a little bit more on PPE and find that you can get comfortable PPE which can help the worker when he's working at height, especially in the summer months. So it's all about the level of cost, I think, of what's provided. Certainly, you don't want to be uncomfortable out there for sure.
Okay. So, okay. Another question is, the usage of MUP in hot works can be covered with a fire blanket around the platform and related controls. Is it allowed?
Um, I would say that you need to speak to the manufacturers. We do see kind of blankets, but it's not just a case of putting a blanket over a platform because naturally we need to know the weight of this kind of activity of how much it's going to affect the platform. Yeah, it's not a straightforward answer because we'd have to look uh, further into it. Naturally, if you're doing hot works, what we want to do is reduce sparks or anything coming down if you're doing grinding into the chassis area because we don't want to have kind of this kind of effect, especially if we've got hydraulic fluid there and this kind of thing. So there's a lot of potential risks, but we would have to look at a bit more into it for sure and see what's available from the manufacturer.
Okay. Then another question. Trying to tell us any rest break limitations should we follow while WAH activities during summer season?
Um, from our side, I think that you need to manage the risks yourself. You can't have 8 hours off a day for sure for breaks, otherwise we would get no work done. But it needs to be sensible, and we need to make sure that the workers are comfortable at working at heights. Venkat, I think that would be back to risk assessment, I think, and job specific.
Exactly, Jason. Just to add on that, if you look at especially on the Gulf region, every country has its own summer working guidelines. It specifically says at what heat index or WBGT and how much break you need to give for the workers, how much, there are advices are very clearly stipulated. And also, when you're working at height, you need to develop a specific risk assessment at what height they are working, what activity they are taking, how fit the workers are. So accordingly, that you need to define how frequently that you should give the break, so that you can manage the risk effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another question is, if there is no formal training indicated in government legislation for MUPs, then which one is internationally recognized operator qualifications for MUP operators to implement at our sites or workplace to ensure MUP operators are competent and properly trained? So
I, I think that's an easy answer.
IPAF.
uh,
IPAF.
it's certainly IPAF. You know, we sit now in, I think it's 87 countries, and delivering training and safety advice, safety information, and so on. Um, if I step back there, and where we've quoted, if there's no formal training indicated in government legislation, I think that you'll find that there's always um, information and guidance in government legislation, and you'll find that all governments will say that you must be trained and competent to operate plant and equipment. So it's always there, and it's just that we might not see you must have this kind of qualification to this one. So, like I say, in terms of legislation, you'll always find that legislation is there somewhere, and it'll use the word competent. And naturally, anybody taking an IPAF course, they are tested and they are assessed on how they inspect the machine, how they operate it as a lift, how they operate it as a drive, and the emergency descent. They're tested on theory and practical. So, you know, it's a high level of training for sure. Okay, so
So
I
I
think
think
we'll
last
close.
question, or you
Yeah,
want to last two questions. So, how can we tackle the issue of operators being uncomfortable wearing PPEs
we've
while
had this
working?
one. We've had this one. They need to focus on their PPE, what they're currently purchasing. I think there's many PPE manufacturers who will supply very good PPE.
Okay. Oh, this one. So, is it safe to attach an umbrella on working platforms as I saw in one of the slides? If yes or a no, I missed that part. So, I think
Absolutely,
no, no.
100%, 200%. Absolutely not. It is not safe. We need to cover up the operators and give them regular breaks. We cannot put a banner or an umbrella over a platform.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll take a close to this because it's now 8:36 for me, and for Ali in the Philippines, it is almost it's all knocking on for 1 o'clock in the morning. So um, yeah, if we can step on, I hope that certainly the presentation has been useful for everyone.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Uh, First of all, thank you very much, Jason, for sharing your knowledge with all our IOSH members. I'm sure I could see more than 100 members have attended this webinar. Most of them are from Qatar, but I could see people from Saudi and all around the world. Thank you very much to all the attendees for making this successful. And thank you, Aliza, for being there and supporting technically to make sure that webinar is happening smoothly. And I would like to thank our media partner, WSH and IPAF, and also from IOSH, I'd like to thank Emmeline for supporting us to make sure that this event happens smoothly from the background. and our IOSH Vice Chair, Mr. Valentine, Secretary Manzoor, and all the executive committee members and all the attendees. Thank you very much for being here. And this, as I said in the earlier, this is the first time we are collaborating with IPAF to have this kind of a webinar. Soon you'll be seeing similar exercise in the coming months quite often, and we'll come out with a lot of program. Probably maybe the first quarter of 2024, Jason and myself are talking about having a physical event also in Qatar. Inshallah, we will make it happen. And thank you very much. And send your queries and feedback to Ayush, and we will send it back to IPAF. Anything specific, requirements, we can get back to you. Thank you very much, Jason and Aliza. Thank you very much. Thank you all the attendees.
Thank
So
you
yeah,
also.
just before we shut off, I would just like to talk about two things. Um, we have some events lined up, so naturally our next webinar will be towards tires wear and tear. So please keep that date in the diary, and make sure you're available, and we can have some good discussion points. As Venkat has said, that if there's any topics that you'd like to have a discussion on, by all means, we can arrange this. It doesn't always have to be Jason presenting. We can have a kind of roundtable discussion on a live platform, which is really good fun. But if it helps and it helps you run projects, for sure, this is the angle we'll go. And that takes me then to an IPAF Middle East event, which we have running next year. Again, the event is going to be dedicated to safety practitioners. The last Middle East conference we run, we had around 350 attend, and the invites will go out to IOSH as a branch and as a group for the GCC to come and join us. I know that your fellows over in Saudi Arabia will enjoy it. Some of them will probably be some of our presenters as well to talk about their projects. Naturally, we got the Neon project happening and this kind of thing, but certainly keep it in your minds if you can help or come attend it with us, and come and join us for sure. So for now, thank you very much. Thank you again, Ali, for staying up so late, and thank you for everybody attending, and naturally thank you, Ayosh, for putting this together with us.
Everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So don't forget to register. So we will be giving certificates to everyone who attended this webinar. So if you missed that link, it's on the comment section, and I'll be roaming around the comment section and replying if you cannot find the registration link for for this webinar to have your certificate. So good night, everyone, and thank you all for watching.